Welcome, everyone, to the Back It Up Binge podcast. I'm your host, JB. Before I introduce my guest for today's discussion, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and follow. Without further ado, I want to introduce my guest today, NFL great Doug Plank. Doug, welcome to the program.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to be on.
Appreciate you joining. Got a lot to cover. I know you as that guy that roamed the secondary and laid out a lot of guys. We'll talk about that in a second. But what I found interesting about you is that when I did some research, you were an all-state running back in high school. How did that switch from running back to D-back?
I think most players in high schools, especially Western Pennsylvania, they played both ways. If you were any kind of an athlete, you played both an offensive position and a defensive position. So I was basically a defensive back on the defensive part of things, and then I was a quarterback of all things you can imagine. I could throw the ball about 65 yards. I had a good arm. I played baseball. I loved baseball, and but when I went to defense, I really felt like that's where I really got turned on. That's where my adrenaline just went off the charts. And I was so excited about each play, each pass, each runner. On offense, it wasn't quite the same situation. Starting to play football when I was 9 years old, I went through a number of different community organized teams that had uniforms in the league and all that sort of thing until I got to high school, or junior high, and then high school. But I just think, you look at it from both perspective. Having been on offense, I kind of knew what a quarterback was thinking in situations. Down and distance, position on the field, personnel. So it helped me in many ways in terms of just trying to be prepared. And there's an old line. Those that don't prepare, the prepare to fail, they fail to prepare. And the bottom line is that really helped me a lot. As I said, just in looking at an offense, for example, from a free safety position and diagnosing what the offense is going to do with those linemen, those splits, the down and distance, what the score of the game was, all those sort of things all came into play. So I would run all these facts and figures through my head. I'd like to say at Ohio State, but I did go to Ohio State, but I didn't play very much.
We'll cover that. Yeah,
we'll do that later. But my point is, I just think prepare yourself to play in a football game, because it's like no other athletic event, other than maybe wrestling and things like that, where you got body contact and stuff like that. But it's one of those few sports that has dramatic hits and plays and distances. And there's a lot of, it's very challenging to be a football player.
So I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you played baseball in high school. Were you a pitcher?
Yes.
Pitcher?
Yeah, I pitched. I also played third base.
Okay.
I had the highest batting average, 526 for 30 years at my high school. But finally, and I'm sorry to say, I forget the gentleman's name. He went on to play Major League Baseball. He's the one that beat my record.
Really?
So that's something I was very, very proud of. I got a free agent contract offer from the Pittsburgh Pirates to sign up and be on the team and try out. Well, at the same time, Ohio State was offering me a 4-year guaranteed paid scholarship. And I felt like, you start measuring up these two things. Which route do I want to go down? And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go with the guaranteed program. As much as I like baseball, if things would have been reversed, I would have been a baseball player.
There you go.
The way they were, I had no choice I'm not saying I had no choice to go to Ohio State, because that's a very cherished and hallowed place. And I'm so glad that I went there, just because it increased my level of knowing what talent was, especially at the high end in the NCAA, but also in moving onward. Not that I was ever thinking about this, playing onward into the NFL, because there were so many players from that university that were already in the National Football League.
So you mentioned Ohio State. You grew up in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, which is about 35 miles from Pitt, about 125 from Penn State. And all of a sudden you go to Ohio State. How did you wind up there versus maybe a Penn State that was in your backyard?
Let me just say this. when in Greensburg, that's where I was born. I lived in a place called Irwin. Irwin's claim to fame was it was exit 7 on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. Anybody else I've told in my life, I'm from Irwin, Pennsylvania, they go, what? Who? Where? Is that a person or a town? 3,500 people, at least at that time. But you're ingrained in Western Pennsylvania, blue collar. Everybody works at a factory. My father worked at a factory. My mother, she sewed for making a living at home, out of generating more revenue for our family. It was all blue collar. I mean, it was work ethic all the way around. You work all the time. A work week wasn't 5 days. It was mandatory 6 and mostly 7. My dad always worked 6 days a week, and a lot of the times he worked 7. And there was never a day off. And you get into that mindset of not having expectations. In other words, you're not expecting anything to happen if you don't work for it. If you don't go out there and seize the opportunity. And I look back on my time in Pennsylvania with my family and my 2 brothers. I couldn't have asked for a better environment to prepare myself for the rest of the things that were going to happen in my life. Don't take anything for granted. You are who you associate with. I learned that lesson very well from my father, and it's so true. I felt like when I was hanging around kind of a dark and gloomy crowd, it impacted my opinions and my feelings. When I was around energized people that were wanting to go places, man, I felt like I was on the ride. I was in the sled. I was in the wagon with them on the ride. And because every day it was like encouraging words, actions. Nothing happens if you don't have actions. You can talk all you want about where you want to go. But I'll say this too. In the state of Pennsylvania, it was almost, I don't want to say illegal, but it was so unpatriotic if you ever even thought about going outside Pennsylvania in terms of going to college. So Pitt at the time, this is before Tony Dorsett got there, Pitt was not a very good team. They were inside the city of Pittsburgh. So I lived out in the suburbs. I mean, it wasn't really suburbs. The houses were all very low, medium priced, a work ethic, like I said. But when you're in Pennsylvania, you love Pitt, especially on the western part, and you love Penn State. I love Penn State. Not many people know this. The first place I ever wanted to go in high school was Penn State. And how do you do that? Well, nobody know who I was. I know they recruited Pennsylvania real heavy, but nobody was knocking on my door. Hey, Doug, we're from Penn State. We love you. We'd love to have you come and be a Nittany Lion. No calls, nothing, no letters. I got some from other schools as I was going through my high school situation. I was the most valuable player of our conference, the Foothills Conference, which had 8 or 9 more teams. It wasn't like I was way down at the bottom of the barrel and I had 2 left feet and I kept tripping myself and I couldn't go anywhere and I dropped balls and I was through more interceptions. No, I was voted the MVP of the conference. But you know what? I don't know if it was my size. I started writing letters to Joe Paterno the first game of my senior year. And it was basically a breakdown on what I did. Dear Coach Paterno, I had to be different than somebody else. I wanted my letter to stick out. So I started each letter with, Dear Coach Paterno, I really want to come to Penn State. And I will do anything to make that happen. Just to let them know, listen, this was not a second thought. I was committed. I was determined. And so I started writing these letters, how many touchdowns I had thrown, maybe how many, what runs I had made, calls, forced fumble, that sort of thing. I'm called down to the office one day. Joe Paterno, he is in our office at Norwin High School in Western Pennsylvania. And I said, Coach, I said, it's great to see you. Glad you could make it. Come. He goes, Doug, after reading those letters, I had to meet the guy that wrote those letters. And so we talked a few minutes about the current environment in football and all that sort of thing. And I said, he quickly got into our circumstance about me wanting to go to Penn State. And he said, Doug, we've already targeted and recruited players at your position. offense and defensively. So we really, and they consented to come to Penn State. So we really don't have any room for you. You could always come over and just try out, without any scholarship. And man, I'll tell you what, you talk about a letdown. That was like the slap in the face. I just, even though I'd never heard from him, going, dear God, he's going to show up one day. And I know he's going to come through that door or come, call me at home. And, but, he said, is there anything I can do for you? He said, I just came and I wanted to thank you for what your commitment and how much you love Penn State. I said, Coach, could you do this? If anyone ever asked you about me, could you just please say you had interest in me? You did. You had interest. You weren't going to recruit me. I wasn't going to come to Penn State. I wasn't bringing anybody else. I said, could you please do that? He goes, Doug, I'll do that. Well, him stopping in my high school the next week in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette or Press, I forget which one it was, the Pittsburgh paper, Joe Paterno visits Norwin High School and he's talking to Doug Plank. And he is really, really interested in Doug. That's all I needed. The phone started ringing the next day. Schools like West Virginia, the Naval Academy, Ohio State University even. I'm like, oh, Ohio State, didn't they just win a national championship? And which they did. And I just saw them on television, a couple weeks ago. And Coach Woody Hayes said, Doug, I'd love to come and visit you. And I said, yeah, yes, sir. That would be great. And he said, so I'll be there tomorrow. And him and another one of the position coaches showed up in my high school, and Coach Hayes, Woody Hayes, was not like your typical football coach. When he came into your home and your parents were there, your mother, your father, maybe even your brothers and stuff, he treated you like you were his son. He was the father. It wasn't like this recruiting of today. How much money can I get? Where can I make it? It wasn't anything like that. He said, and he almost wasn't recruiting me. He kept looking at my parents this whole time that he talked there for 2 hours. I guarantee you, Doug Plank is going to graduate. He says, because you know what? We don't let it not happen. He says, we know every grade that they make. Even in the midterm, we know what direction. We talk to their professors. We know whether he's going to fail or pass that class. And we have people that we can access, tutors, things like that. That was one of the highest, when Woody Hayes was at Ohio State, it was one of the highest graduation rates. I think it led any Big Ten school. I had never heard of any other coach doing that. That was almost like he was more, when he left, my parents thought he was like Santa Claus. He was so nice. Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Plank, we're going to take care of your son. He's going to get an education. He's going to be around a lot of, great players that have their life in order, setting goals. I'm thinking everybody said he was such a mean man that hit everybody and threw projectors. And, my parents going, he's like one of the most nicest people we've ever met in our life. So when he walked out of that house that night, it took about 30 seconds for my parents to go, that's where you're going, Doug. That's where you're going. And like I said, even though Joe Paterno came to my high school, and told me those bad news about not being able to, it's funny that year too. In Pennsylvania, there's a all-star game in high school. After the senior season, they picked 33 guys out from the East and the West. They call it the Big 33 game. It's played in Harrisburg. And the guy that represented our conference, he was injured or got hurt. And so they called me up. They go, hey, Doug, how would you like to play in this Big 33 game? Well, it was like 3 days down the road. I went, isn't you talking about the 33 game that's Big 33 that's, going to happen in 3 days? They go, yeah, we do. They go, well, if you get up here, you can at least get 2 practices in before you play. I went, done. That afternoon, I got in the car, drove up to Harrisburg, wherever it was. It was more over towards the eastern part of the state. And, it was funny because I had a chance to practice on that team for about 5 days before the game. And it wasn't the day before. I at least had 4 or 5 days of preparation. the Penn State coaches were coaching that game on both the East and the West.
Wow.
This is the first time that those coaches had had a chance to look at me. Now, to me, if I get on the field with spikes and shoulder pads and a helmet, this is full go. This is not half go. We're not playing touch. No. When I went there and got in that big 33 practice, first one, I was ravaging the other team. Probably because I had fresh legs too. And I got up there and I go, I only got minutes to show these guys what I could do.
Right.
Before the game, one of their coaches came over to me in the locker room and said, Doug, we made a big mistake. After watching you practice for 5 days, 4 or 5 days, he goes, we wish you'd be a Nittany Lion. Things were already too late then. I'd already signed. I went to Ohio State, signed it on, the scholarship and things like that. Just that alone, man, I'll tell you what, you talk about resonating inside of me. Like, listen, okay, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And how are you going to finish?
Yeah.
And I played well in the game. And it was, I never look back with any regret. And, having been a Chicago Bear, for eight years and stuff like that, Joe Paterno when he was in Chicago, would stop by and say hi or gave me a telephone call. He's almost like my relative, like an uncle, Uncle Joe. I didn't really tell a lot of people about this. Why would, anybody want to know in Chicago that Joe Paterno called me or
Right.
at Ohio State? I don't want to act like, I'm sorry I went to Ohio State. But you know what? Things happen in your life. And the first day at Ohio State, I never played on AstroTurf. In matter of 5 minutes, I was on offense at the time. I was playing quarterback, running back, and this walkthrough practice developed into a full game scrimmage with just helmets, a t-shirt, and shorts. We're tackling each other. I mean, this is like the first day we've been in Ohio Stadium, and it's like a game. And there's an offense and a defense. And it wasn't set up that way. This was supposed to be a walkthrough practice. But all these players have egos in them and say, oh, man, I'm going to show them. I'm going to show them. I'm going to show them. Well, I wish I'd have known that before I ran through the hole that day at half speed. I got hit from the side, tore my cartilage, and partially tore a ligament. And I had surgery shortly afterwards. So my whole freshman year was gone.
Wow.
I had a lot of time to think about it. And I started getting more determined. I just said, you know what? And you know what? When you get hurt the first day, all due respect, they treat you like a first day injury. Like, oh my gosh, what a disaster it was. We recruited you, Doug.
Right.
Coaches would say stuff like that. Just maybe not the head coach, not the assistant coaches at Ohio State, but maybe like some of the assistant helpers and stuff like that. They go, man, Doug, you were a big disappointment. We thought you'd help us out. A tough guy from Pennsylvania. And I'm just registering all this in my brain. And I'm going, you know what? You guys don't know what's going to look like when I get 2 good legs. I'm getting choked up right now. I didn't know the difference between practice and games.
Did you ever in your career at Ohio State play Penn State?
No, we didn't. They never. That whole relationship developed after I had left.
Okay.
Coming into the Big Ten and all that sort of thing. No, I just, yeah, it was, here's the other thing. I was really, I don't want to say I was a mama's boy. I was really scared about going other places. When people I got a letter one time from Arizona because their coach was a former person of a coach in Pennsylvania. He said, Doug, I hear you've done great things in the Foothills Conference and, would like to really have you come out. Flying from Pittsburgh to Arizona, that's like going to Japan. I would never be heard from again. I've never been to Arizona. I've never been west of Mississippi. I've never been west of that river that ran through our town. It was like, I can't go there. I mean, I was so immature. And
did that injury first practice limit your playing time the next 3 years? Because you played in 3 Rose Bowls, you lettered 3 years, but you didn't start a lot of games, which is counterintuitive to me, knowing your career in the NFL.
It's when you're on a team that's winning 3 Big Ten titles and going to the Rose Bowl every year, the coaches feel like we really need to shake our lineup up. We really need to find out who really wants to play on this team. These guys that won the Big Ten and maybe go to the Rose Bowl, that's not good enough. We want somebody that's really, I'm just saying that wasn't the position that they had. Their position was, okay, the guys we have on the field, we're winning. We're winning Big Ten titles. We're going to Rose Bowls. Everything's great. Everything's fine. Why would we want to mix things up? We don't want to disrupt anything. So unfortunately, when I came in after getting hurt the first year, not practicing, my practices were over. I didn't practice until the next year, or spring football. I'm sorry, spring football when I was a freshman, and I worked my way up 2 levels. I was way down like at 4th level, safety, and I got back up to like 2nd level. So I was like, not the next man up, but in that category that I played on special teams. I was on almost all the kickoff, the kickoff team, punt return, plays where you were running full speed on the field. And, I felt like that when you only get a chance to play 8 plays or so in a game, oh my God, when those plays come around, like kickoff return, you're like on the sideline. I can't wait to get in there. I can't wait to hit somebody. That was the play.
Okay.
And, even in practice, I just couldn't turn it off and on. Although I did have a switch too. I could be a very nice guy, hugging everybody and everything. The next minute, I'll knock your helmet off.
There you go.
But you know what? That was the expectations for me. And so, unfortunately, for the next 3 years, if someone didn't get hurt, I wasn't going to play. And,
Understood.
So I started once, I think I started the Rose Bowl maybe my senior year. No, it was my sophomore year because the injuries just happened to be, I ended up starting my sophomore year against Michigan and Michigan State. I'm sorry, against USC. We played USC all 3 years in the Rose Bowl. But you know what? Once I think a player, a coach, a university gets an idea about who they think you are, you're never going to outdo it. You're never going to change their mind.
Gotcha.
They're always going to go, no, you're, nah. It's and I thought, you know what? It's nice to have talent and be a starter and play. One thing I enjoyed about, where I was, I felt like I had the talent to play. I didn't have the opportunity to play, but you know what? That in itself motivated me more than any coach would in the country. I didn't need a pep talk before every game. I was already turned on. Just tell me where the field's at. Got my helmet on. I'm ready to go.
There you go.
It's funny. They would take me out of practices because I thought that was the game. Woody Hayes used to always tell us, you practice the way you play. You practice. Coach, that's all I wanted to hear. I'm practicing the way I play. And that offensive scout team, I felt sorry for them because that was a shooting match.
There you go. You mentioned Woody Hayes. Another big name that you were teammates with was a 2-time Heisman Trophy winner, Archie Griffin. What was it like playing against him in practice? What was he like as a teammate?
Number one, as soon as he won that Heisman Trophy, you couldn't touch Archie in practice. Not that you ever wanted to, because he was a huge contributor for us. He was not as tall. He was like, I think a little bit under 6 foot, but he was fast. He had a heart. He could break tackles. He was fast. He could quick. He changed direction. He was from Columbus. What a story! I think he's still the only 2-time Heisman Trophy winner. Just that's amazing feat. But he was on an amazing team also. And having played with Walter Payton my first year in ’75, Walter would ask me several times, Doug, why didn't I get the Heisman Trophy? I'm sorry for diversing. But this was a story that I think needed to be told. And he said, I said, Walter, it's real simple. You went to Jackson State. Archie and I went to Ohio State.
Yeah.
You were never on national television. We were usually on like 4 times each year. The Rose Bowl, Michigan game, and usually 2 games during the season. I said, this is nothing more. I shouldn't say that because I don't want to disrespect any Heisman Trophy winner, but it's about opportunity to get on television and see people in action. That's going to happen at Ohio State. You're going to see yourself in action, not at Jackson State.
That's right. No, that's true.
Walter got on that field. Oh my God, I was taken back. He could throw the ball like 70 yards. He could catch, he could kick, he could punt. This guy could do everything. And
You know,
strong,
he had a great college career himself, but
great.
Archie never really got up to the Walter Payton in the NFL. Walter just
No,
kept going,
never.
right? So you
That's right.
saw the talent there, and you're right. It's exposure, and that's what it comes down to a lot. But you're drafted by the Bears in the 12th round, and you're in the same draft class as Walter Payton. What was it like
That's right.
for you walking into that Bears locker room the first time, saying, "All right, I'm here in the NFL"? You know, you only just one more point. You only played, you know, you didn't start many games at Ohio State, but you
No.
come into the NFL, you have 101 games played. You started 96 and didn't skip a beat. So what was it like for you walking into that organization, that locker room?
Number one, you know, I was just so surprised because the first thing they do was they have a meeting with the team. They said, "Listen, congratulations, you're all Chicago Bears. We drafted you. Some are free agents. For all you guys that are, you know, veterans, you know, we're going to try to make a difference." And they put the new players, the rookies, by alphabetical order. Walter Payton was my roommate in '75 in training camp. And that's when he was asking me this question about Archie Griffin. And I just said, Walter, I said, if you want to you want me to tell you, you are bigger, physical, stronger. You're all that. And you're determined. Just like Archie. Archie had a great career, a lot of stats. Walter was out to try to prove himself. You know, to prove himself to a bigger audience, the National Football League. I remember the first time I tried tackling him. Man, I'll tell you what, I didn't expect that forearm in my face. The ringing in was inside my helmet. The power and just pushing me out of the way. Of course, I wasn't trying to give him 100% because I quickly realized we need him badly. He's number one threat on our team in terms of scoring, moving the ball, all those sort of things. But you know, it was one of those things that it took me like the first day, Walter. I never practiced against a guy like him, you know, and then everybody appreciated who he was because when we saw him in a couple games, like in preseason, we're saying we never want to hurt this guy in practice. You know, no one. If they're going to run plays in practice, he's going to run through it. We're not going to touch anybody. I mean, maybe touch him like hand touch. No, there's no tackling, nothing like that. I remember even like in practices, like during training camp where they had scrimmages and stuff like that, Walter usually very seldom ever even participated because you know what? He's the guy you need to put on the field at Soldier Field and say, we are determined we're going to have a running game and we're going to win this game. And that's what every player on the team felt like. Offense, defense, special teams, didn't matter. Here's what I'll say about Ohio State. Ohio State really prepared me for the National Football League. I don't know how many 8, 9, 10 players were drafted my senior year in the National Football League. Many first rounders. I was already playing against NFL talent in practice every day. So I was not in a small college where it was overwhelming for me. In fact, after the first couple practices, I told somebody from Ohio State that was I'm not going to tell you who it was, that was on the team. I go, I think Ohio State could beat these guys on a good day. That was the Chicago Bears without Walter Payton. They had lost a lot the year before, so they were bringing in a brand new coach. What does a rookie want to do that's never been with that team? What would he like to see happen? A new coach come in. You know why? He has no ideas or opinions of anybody else on that team. He's show me right now. Show me what you've got. And you know what? Jack Pardee was a tough guy. He was a linebacker for the Los Angeles Rams for a long period of time. He was a good coach, you know, in the National Football League. And Jack was a tough guy, overcame cancer, a whole bunch of other personal, you know, boundaries that he overcame. I go, this is perfect. I never went to practice without my mouthpiece. You know, that thing, because a scrimmage could break out at any moment. And I always wanted to be prepared. And after like a couple days, I started out like, I don't know if I was the third or fourth safety on the Chicago Bears. That's what happens to you when you're in your 12th round. People don't realize when that draft starts, there's a long time between first round draft choices. You get down to like the 5th or 6th or 7th or 8th or like the 12th round like me, They're picking guys like every minute, every
Right.
2 or 3 minutes.
Right.
Okay, one team, the Atlanta Falcons, they take this guy. Okay, the Bears are coming up in 3 more minutes for their 12th round guy. We had 17 rounds. A fullback for us. There was a fullback for Walter Falter for 4 years, Roland Harper. He was a 17th round draft pick. It just goes to show you, though, I'm not saying in every case. There are some players, the recruiting system is not always the greatest. I wish they could have came around and personally interviewed everybody. I never got interviewed. When that last game was over against USC, and I'm walking into the locker room, I truly am thinking, this is done. This is the last time I will ever play football in my life. And I'm just looking around the Rose Bowl with all the magnificent, that stadium, being out in California, the crowd. Believe me, the shock of my life was in a couple weeks in January later when I come back from a class to my apartment and my roommate's going, Doug, there's a guy from Chicago called. And he said, they drafted you with the Bears. I go, listen, don't tell me any stories. I said, you don't need to do that. And he goes, no, seriously. I said, okay, where's the number? He gives me this number. It's I don't even know what the area codes were. I call the telephone. I grab the telephone book and look inside, and I think it's 312 was the area code. I go, okay, this is the Chicago area code. I called it, and it was the assistant general manager, Bill McGreen. And he said, Doug, we were at the game in Northwestern in Evanston, Illinois, your senior year, and a safety in front of me, I believe it was Tim Fox, who was a first-round draft pick with the Patriots for 12 years. I went in and played a great game. I got an interception. I made all the kickoff tackles so I could be a special teams player, play defense. And it was amazing. I'm going, I probably start crying. I don't usually cry in my life. I remember the episodes when it happens. And I'm thinking, this is amazing. I said, isn't life great? This could happen like it did. Me coming to a place like Evanston, where they just drove over. They didn't fly to Evanston. That was like just a few miles from the Bears headquarters. Just drove right up a little bit north. Now you're in Evanston, Northwestern. They sit there, watch that whole game, which we blasted Northwestern. Here's how crazy it was. I was voted the defensive back, not the defensive back, the defensive Buckeye of the week on defense. The next week, we're playing like Michigan, or maybe it was somebody else. I think it was Michigan. I go back to the bench. They go back to the bench, Doug. You did a good job, fill in for us, and now it's time to bring the starter back.
Right.
And you're going back to special teams. And so when this whole thing happened and they make a phone call to Doug Plank, I'm thinking, this is not happening to me. I'm dreaming. I got to slap myself in the face, wake up, because who's going to draft me after what happened, whoever I played for. And so my senior year, like I said, that last Rose Bowl especially, didn't get in. And we lost the last second of the game, last play of the game. Pat Hayden threw a touchdown pass. Went for two to win the game. And all those sort of things, I just thought, man, it was a great run. I'm so thankful for Ohio State that we could at least be here in the Rose Bowls.
So you mentioned Pardee. He was your coach for the first 3 years. Then Armstrong comes in for 4, and then Ditka your last year. What was it like to transition from Pardee to Armstrong to Ditka and playing for each one of those guys? You mentioned Pardee a little bit. How about Armstrong and Ditka?
Well, Jack, like I said before, the one thing that I knew rookie really wants is a brand new coach. So you can create your magic or your brand. And so they never saw me back in college. They knew I didn't play very much, but I could. And they right away put me on special teams when I came in as a rookie. With the Bears, which, hey, I'm fine with that. It's not like I'm being demoted. It's not like I was a 3-year starter at some smaller school and now all of a sudden, this happens a lot of times in the NFL. They put starters, guys that they recruit, drafted on special teams. Hey, what can you do for us? I tell you, special teams, that's where the men are. The brave. You're running full speed. Your contacts are full speed contacts, especially back then. You're basically able to do just about anything. Cut guys down, chop them down, hit them in the ear hole with your helmet, You name it, it didn't matter. You just go ahead and get somebody on the ground. And that's something I could do. I didn't take it as a slap. And so I knew that I was going to probably make the team as a special teams player. And I just continually saw my stock get better and better and better. You would come in each day, and there was a board at each position with names on it. And it was like an achievement board. And you looked at that. It was in a locker room. You look and go, oh my gosh, I moved up 2 spots already. I mean, this is like you're looking at reality in life. You know, when you're only in football, those few weeks in training camp, man, first thing you do, you get in that locker room, you're looking where's the charts at, where's the, you know, and who's starting and what position are they at. And lo and behold, at the end of 6 preseason games, my name was on the top of that chart for starting free safety. And I was beneficial also. The existing veteran free safety, Gary Lyle, was injured that preseason. So once again, another opportunity. Just, I wasn't going to get hurt the first practice. You know why? Because I learned from Ohio State. I learned that there really isn't a walkthrough practice. I never had a walkthrough practice in my life. Every walkthrough practice I had shoulder pads on, helmet, and my face mask. That's my interpretation of a walkthrough practice. You come anywhere near me in my little zone, look out.
But did your role or the way you were treated change from coach to coach, or was it?
It did. Huge. It did.
It did.
All of a sudden now I had a regular conversation with Jack Pardee. You know, because he really appreciated the things that I was doing on special teams, kickoffs, and on defense. And again, you know, when you're accustomed to always being on, you know, there was a first team, at Ohio State, there was a first team, a second team, and then after second team, it was called AYOs. I was in all 3 of those groups in my career at Ohio State. I was in the AYOs, all you others, that acronym. Used to be on schedules like that too. I was back up to basically the bulk of my time at Ohio State, and I started a few games. But as soon as those games were over, boom, I'm back down. I was reminded quickly where I stood. You know, as soon as that person was healthy and could run, 5 steps without limping or something, he was in the game. So I was just thankful again for the opportunity to at least play a little bit at the end of my senior year, and not knowing that a Chicago Bear scout came to that Northwestern game in Evanston, Illinois. That is what got me recruited. Not, the kids go, there's a big thing now, and it's probably one of the most televised events in terms of watching it from the NFL players standpoint or fans. It's the combine. It's all, let's work these guys out.
Right.
There was no combine when I played at Ohio State. You got calls from teams. I never got a call from a team. No one ever called me. Why would I ever think the phone was going to ring on draft day? They didn't want to know where I was, who I was, what my classes were, nothing. I mean, and from that day on, my life has just been a dream.
So you're known as a hard hitter. You patrolled the middle and the secondary. In fact, you go back on YouTube, I have a short I posted of you diving into Earl Campbell, taking him out. There's another one that's a famous photo, famous play of you basically leveling Jimmy Giles. Did anybody ever get you, though? I mean, you got them. Did anybody ever get you?
There was a couple times on special teams that, because you're really, once the ball is in the air, whatever it is, a kickoff, a punt, or whatever, it's like all the rules are gone, especially for special teams players. I don't want to say they're a lower value, a lower grade, but they really are in terms of the value to the team. So it also, that transcends itself right to the officials, the referees. They take that same sort of position. Not that you could go around hurting people or doing things very illegal, but if there was ever anything that you could do, cutting some guy's legs out, hitting him in the back, all those sort of things, it was always pretty much good to go. Unless somebody got hurt and that was a career-ending injury or something like that. Even the time you mentioned, the time I hit Jimmy Giles during a game, that's all I heard all week from Coach Ryan. Doug Plank, Jimmy Giles is going to come down the middle of the field sometime during this game. Jimmy Giles is going to come down the middle. He repeated it every single day to me. You got that? He called me Blondie because I had blonde hair back then. He goes, you got that, Blondie? Long blonde hair. My dad used to shave my head every 2.5 weeks when I grew up in Pennsylvania. Another reason for me leaving Pennsylvania to go to Ohio State, I said, I can't wait to get out of the state. I'm going to grow some hair. If you see any of my pictures from Chicago or from the college, it looks like I was just some crazy guy with long hair. And
Right.
you know what, though? Long hair, a lot of guys, and even coaches at Ohio State, made remarks to me like, oh, how do you like being a girl, Doug? How do you like that long hair? Well, how do you set your hair? Do you use bobby pins and rollers? I'm serious. These were the kind of Woody Hayes hated my hair. I didn't find he didn't tell me, but he told friends of mine.
Right.
So I said you could have long hair and still hit people. I mean, that's the way it was. You had to have that switch though, and unfortunately, growing up in an atmosphere where nothing was given to you, you had to work for everything. I was used to turning that switch on and not giving 80%, 90%, no, 100%. Because later, as I found out when I was a coach, with the NCAA, with Ohio State and all the NFL teams I was with, there's nothing like a person showing you, not telling you, showing you what he could do. And maybe in practice, maybe in a game, doesn't matter. But you could tell the real life guys from the pretenders.
So your first interception was in your second career game, and it was against Roman Gabriel. Later on, you had
Yes.
a 2-interception game against Joe Namath. Was there one particular quarterback that you were able to read the best, or was there one quarterback that was so tough to read that he always maybe burned you deep?
Being a free safety, you're supposed to be the deepest man on the defense. You're the deepest of the deepest. So, and I learned that. You know what? Here's the other thing. At Ohio State, I never played free safety. When like Gary Lyle went down and Jack Pardee walked into I'm sure diversing here a little bit. He walked into our defensive meeting room. He goes, "Hey, any of you guys played free safety in college?" I went, "Coach, me. I love free safety. I played it a lot." I had never played free safety. And so that next practice, I'm back at free safety trying to pretend like I know what I'm doing. As soon as that practice was over, I headed to the film room. And for the next 2 or 3 weeks, all I did at lunchtime was watch what a free safety does. And I learned things like look at the offensive line, look at the splits. If they're wide splits, they're not going to be doing a drop back pass because a tackle or end could get around real fast. No, their passes, they were tighter, so they wanted to get the guy in front of you. And the same thing with their stance. When they were going to run the ball, offensive linemen after the first series now, because they always try to fool you the first few games of the game because they're fresh, they're energized. After one series, these big, heavy, fat guys, they're tired. They don't want to fake anybody out. If they're going to go back to pass, they put their hand down. That hand is in between their legs. It's that bad. When it's a running play, they act like that hand is way, way out here. And as a free safety, I learned all this on my own, watching end zone film. Every game, there's a camera on both end zones, usually, and on the sidelines. There's nothing on that field that you do that's not getting dissected.
Right.
Not only down in distance, position on the field. I'm telling you, I would go in there and watch those films, and I learned a heck of a lot. And it helped me so much even later in my career when Buddy Ryan came up with this 46 defense with me at the middle linebacker position. He always said, "Doug, you're no free safety, Doug. Paul Krause, I coached him up with the Vikings. That's a free safety. You're a linebacker. You keep wanting to hit everybody all the time." I led the team in tackles my freshman year, or not freshman, my rookie year with the Bears. There was 10 guys in front of me. Why didn't they make the tackle?
So you talk about the 40-60 and everybody hears that, but Buddy came to the team in 78. Was that a personnel or a scheme or a both that made that so successful?
Most defenses are read the defensive play, and then react. Buddy Ryan already said, we are going to look at this team. We're going to break all their plays down. Their formation, their personnel packages, where are they on the field? What's the down and distance? Everything says a message. They might try to fake you out the first couple series, but every team gets back into their routine. And Buddy and I would spend a lot of time together because I made all the defensive calls on the 46 defense. When I left, then Mike Singletary came in, did a great job, obviously an All-Pro, Hall of Fame. And crazy as it sounds, every team, whether they realize it or not, they're developing habits. With personnel in the game, you could almost read and tell them what the play was going to be before it even happened. Now, I know teams have changed a lot since then, but back then, hey, it was simple. It was easy. I mean, so we weren't reading anything. When that ball snapped, everybody had an assignment. We were running through holes. There was no, if you were a quarterback, we put about 80% of the quarterbacks out. The ones that started, they didn't finish the game because they were going to get hit every single time. And even me at the middle linebacker position, I started getting all kind of sacks, because you know what? I would run through low, fast, and a lot of times that's not what that running back expected. He expected some lumbering defensive tackle or something to come through that gap.
So the 46 pinched you into the linebacker, the second tier. Did that mean that Fencik then was free to roam the patrol back there?
Yeah, he was a free safety. He came over and played right the middle position on the field. He was the free safety. Okay. Gary made all the defensive coverage calls. Here's the other thing too. Buddy, 46 defense was like this right here. That meant automatic front coverage. Buddy Ryan would give you a game plan, me and Gary Fencik, about probably 40 different configurations of line charges, blitzes, coverages, personnel packages, who they had in the game. We would call a certain blitz, defense, coverage, but Gary and I had to memorize all that. So Buddy would be on the sidelines and go like this. That meant automatic front and coverage. Now you two guys better dream up this in your brain, those 40 or 50 plays that I told you to memorize based on the personnel in the game, the field position, how much time's left, down and distance. I mean, it was, but we had to memorize that. And
was the 46 basically just a terminology for the scheme itself and named after your number, or was it 4 men, 6 men, 1, or was it just?
No, it was a six-man line.
Okay.
We put 2 guys over top the tight end, and then so that's the 2 linebackers. Then we had 4 defensive linemen. Ends, tackles.
Were opponents getting frustrated by that they couldn't master that?
Extremely frustrated. Well, the quarterback was the most frustrated because you know what? He got knocked on his you-know-what over and over. And you know what? Guys would just come in. It was almost like a circus. When one guy went down, back when you were allowed to do this, another guy would just jump on top and then jump on top, like some kind of cartoon circus routine. Right. It wasn't funny to quarterbacks. You were wearing quarterbacks out fast. If you notice, there was no running, no quarterback running, down through the defense. You know why? Because Buddy Ryan, all that week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he was infiltrating in your brain a mood of violence. Violence is the wrong word. Aggressiveness, and he would call you out. That's what I loved about Buddy. He didn't wait until the film session or whatever. Man, you had to be a man. You had to be a brave person every single day. But you know what? You were rewarded. Usually a lot of times, there was little things, like dinners for 2 and stuff like that. I mean, it sounds crazy, but you know what? Everybody wants to have a pat on the back and say, good job. And it's just that, but it was so much fun. I felt like I was back on the playground again when Buddy brought that 46 defense in. Every play, we are attacking. we are knocking guys down, hitting them. I mean, nobody wanted to go against that thing because somebody was going to get hurt. It wasn't about react, read and then react. No, it was go hit and then get off the block and then go get the quarterback.
When you watch that 30 for 30 on the Bears, and they talk a lot about Buddy, the players absolutely loved him, were very dedicated to him. But what seemed on that team was there was a split between the offensive side and the defensive guys. Is that what you experienced, or was it more cohesive than that?
No doubt about it. And especially when Mike Ditka came in, you got to remember, Coach Ryan, along with his two sons, were, the ball boys, Rex and Rob. And so I got to know them really well and coach with Rex later on with the Jets. But, when you knew Buddy loved you, he loved you, man. And I got to tell you, I never cried much in my life. I'm not going to say I cried in a specific. There were times when he got done talking to us, like, we're going to go out and we're going to win this week. And we're all going to be proud of each other on Monday. Silence in the room. I mean, I've never seen this ever in any football players from, high school all the way up through the NFL. When he was done talking, you were ready to play.
Yeah, that's great.
You were ready to play
right now, Doug, with you knowing that and we'll get to this question next, that you were a head coach in the AFL, but we'll talk about that in a second. You got me all fired up today. You retire in 82, which I found really interesting. You retire in 82. You're a year away from the sport.
Yes.
But all of a sudden, you go back to the Chicago Blitz in the USFL. You're playing for Marv Levy. What was that? What was the reasoning behind you take a year off? Let me get back to football.
I mean, I know it was crazy. What happened was I suffered with all the head trauma that I had through my career. It's hard to run at somebody and then take your head and move it out of the way. You ever try to? I mean, it's like trying to take the front bumper off a car, in demolition derby and say, okay, go back out there now, and I want you to hit somebody, but don't use that bumper in the front. Right. That's what the helmet is. It's a bumper. So all the way I'm all the way through college and in Ohio State and everything, it's okay. I mean, I don't think I got any spearing calls ever at Ohio State. That helmet, my Ohio State helmet and Chicago Bear helmet is sitting in the room over here on a shelf. Both of those helmets are cracked. I cracked both of them in my career. The Ohio State one was at the Rose Bowl, and the other one was the last year I played for the Chicago Bears. I cracked that helmet, and usually it cracks where the helmet attaches to the face mask because there's a hole drilled there, and there's tremendous torque on that face mask. When you go ahead and hit somebody, I never had that vertical bar until the second and third year where I got my nose. In 2-year period, I broke my nose 4 times. You know what? They start saying, "Hey, Doug, you're diving into so many people. You need to get that middle bar." So, okay. I mean, how many free safeties you see today with like a middle bar, like a line? I'm like, come on, give me a break. When you're leading the team in tackles, you want everything you can in front of you because the Earl Campbells of the world are coming, and they're looking you up, and they're big, and they got huge thighs, and they don't care, and they just want to run over you. And so you better go out there with that game face on because you're going to get it.
Was there a particular player, either a receiver or running back? You mentioned Earl Campbell, but you loved going against because they were so good, but you got your hits on them. Is there one particular that you could think of?
I think that we all study film and we look for vulnerable areas where we could knock players down. And Earl Campbell, he ran with a forward lean, and that one tackle that you're talking about, when I got him down, I started watching him with the end zone camera, which means there's an end zone behind me and on the other end of the field. So I kept thinking, that's where he's running right at me. Where would be a vulnerable area? And I thought that vulnerable area would be between these two hips. There's a lot of stuff that's down there between the two hips, and that's where I hit him. That's where I hit him. That's where he went down, and he had metal thigh pads on. I didn't want to hit him there. It's funny when you tackle somebody with metal thigh pads, it reminded me in baseball of having an aluminum bat hit a ball and it goes doing, doing. That's the way your helmet resonated after you hit Earl Campbell in the thigh. And unfortunately, when you run over that many players like he did in his life, he's not in great shape. I'm not sure of his physical status right now, but I had heard he had multiple injuries or surgeries.
Yeah.
And
well, he was the guy that was carrying the ball over 300 times a season, multiple consecutive seasons. That's got to. And
yes.
You're right. He never shied away from a hit.
No.
He'd run through you, or he'd have Doug Plank hurling himself at him to take him down. Right. I mean, that's basically what you did. I got to tell you, Doug, those two shorts on my channel got thousands of views and great comments. You should check them out. But this is interesting because you eventually get into coaching, but it's not in the NFL, and you may have coached in the NFL, but I remember you from the Arena League. I was a big arena football fan back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And you had a very successful career there. Georgia Force was one of the teams. You took two teams to the finals, but it's a completely different game.
Yes, it is.
It's probably faster than the NFL in certain respects. But the one rule I always understood, but it was so counterintuitive, is like at the end of the half, you let the team score so then you can score and then get the ball back. They don't do that in the NFL. What was that adjustment like for you to go to the Arena League?
You know what? I started rewriting some of the philosophies and habits of what was there beforehand. I started at the end of the games. You really had to play use the clock. The clock was so much more important in arena football than it was in regular football because the field is so long. When you're playing arena football, it doesn't matter. Anywhere on the field, you could have a legitimate place to go and make. So what I would do is a lot of times, like if we were trying to run the clock out and we were on defense, this sounds crazy. I would just tell all my players, especially like running backs, receivers, they would come running down the field. I wouldn't even let them get down the field. I would go up there and press them and just basically tackle everybody. I would tackle the linemen because when we were on offense, we had the lead. Let's say we had a lead, a 6-point or 7-point lead. And I called this my freeze package. And what happens is there's 3 guys rushing the quarterback. I tell our offensive linemen, not only do I want you to block those linemen, I want you to hold them and get them on the ground and don't let them up. Well, offensive linemen aren't very good at that. So what I would do is I brought in a lot of the defensive linemen, like linebackers and tackles, and I put them on the line of scrimmage. And when that play happened, they took their guy down like a wrestling match. A play wasn't 10 or 15 seconds. A play was 3 or 4 minutes. We would run the clock out. We killed the time. And you know what? During the game, we did that to the team. And on the last drive of the game, there was a referee's timeout, and they walked over to me and they wanted me to talk with Arthur Blank. They had called Arthur Blank on the phone. They just said, Doug, if you do that play again, this was on a Monday night game down Arena Football. He goes, you and your owner, Arthur Blank, are going to be fired, and you are going to be suspended from ever coaching in the Arena Football League. This is during the game. I'm walking over on the field talking to the commissioner, who later goes to the National Football League.
That's David Baker.
I go, yes, sir. Yes, sir. He goes, you understand me. You are not going to, like the guy used to come around in motion, the motion guy. Yeah. We just tackled him and put him down. He never got 5 yards downfield, and he couldn't even get up because we were just grabbing him and holding him like this. The clock just kept running and running and running and running. And I've never seen rule changes during the game. I said, he came over and says, that's the new rule, Doug. We just starting from this point forward, you are not allowed to tackle everybody, keep them on the ground, and don't let them up.
Well, the whole premise of that league, right, is 65-60 is the score, and you're holding it down to 30-35, right? So.
You know, it's funny. I still remember, I'm not sure which quarterback it was for us, but, when we were on offense, that pass rush, they only were allowed to rush 3 guys. They were all at the line of scrimmage, like in a wrestling mode on the ground. They couldn't get to the quarterback. The quarterback would get back like 10 yards. And I told him, act like you're going to throw the ball. So he would go like this for like 2 or 3 minutes until the clock ran out. And because nobody could run across the line of scrimmage except for 3 guys. And they're all on the ground. They're getting taken out by our offensive line.
There was so much talent in that league back then.
So much
my
talent.
favorite was Damian Harrell from the Crush. You had Chris Jackson on the Avengers. I think your offensive coordinator was a great quarterback for the Desperados in Dolezal, right?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, Clint. Oh my gosh. Yeah, he is very great coach, great attitude.
Aaron Garcia on New York. I mean, what
Yes.
talent in that league. But eventually you retire from the game and you got involved with a ton of stuff after your playing days. You were a realtor, you were a licensed health care salesperson, real estate. I think you owned 20 Burger Kings at one point.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
over
a 20-year period.
What was the most enjoyable for you to do in your post career?
You know what? I think that you always have to be prepared for the future, and because you never know, especially in the national football, in pro sports, your career, whatever it is, coaching, playing, may be over at any time. So my 5th year, I didn't tell anybody this. I was a Chicago Bear. I was asked to go do a speaking engagement in Michigan. Well, it just so happened it was for a company called Burger King, and no matter where I went, I would always find the person that put the event together, the vice president, whatever it was, the commissioner. And I would talk to them. So after this event, after this autograph event or whatever, speaking event, I would find all I could about those companies. And I said, would you hire a guy like me after I'm done with my career? And some said no, some said yes. Well, anyway, I just started going through that and figuring out, I don't want the end to come. And then all of a sudden they said, we don't need you anymore, Doug. Thank you for your time. My 5th year, like I said, after getting done with Burger King, I acted like the guy who was a franchisee. And I ended up meeting somebody that introduced me to an executive with Burger King. And they said, Doug, this is my 5th year now. He said, we're going to have you go to a Burger King restaurant and you can work in it to see whether this is something you want to do. So back then, the off seasons were the off seasons. What do I mean by that? The day you left the last game of the year, nobody saw you until the next year when the training camp started.
And most
Not
people
like
worked
now.
a job, right? Most people.
Yeah, everybody worked.
Yeah.
It's amazing that last day you would hear the guys in the locker room going, man, I'll be working tomorrow. I'll be doing this. I'll be, welding fences together and doing all kind of road work. And I mean, it was hilarious because everybody had 2 jobs. And so nobody ever was thinking, well, where are you going, Doug? Why are you working at a Burger King, for 90 days? Well, it was all part of the process of becoming a franchisee. And so
were you like the fry guy or you were just sitting there?
I did everything. Front counter, fry guy, the shake machine. It's really hard feeding that hamburger into a broiler. You got to lay them on a chain. Listen, I've done that. I worked 6 years for my uncle as a garbage man in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania. Used to get up in the summers, we started at 4:00 in the morning, and I did that for at least 3 months. And during the season, or during when school happened, usually like on a Saturday morning or something like that, I would always help out on a Saturday route. I loved it though. It was really getting paid to lift weights. You pick up cans every weekend, man, you're going to get strong, especially.
I read an article about Lyle Alzado. That's what he did, right? He'd run behind the truck, he'd toss the garbage in, and that was his workout.
That's right? It. Honestly, there were some smells. Oh my gosh, I never wanted to smell them again. But it's one of those jobs, that you glad you did it, but you don't want to go back. It's not
absolutely.
something. But
what's interesting, Doug, is when you started out this conversation, you talked about your strategy to get Joe Paterno.
Yes.
To recognize you. Do you ever look back now and say how much that strategy, that desire, that drive connected to a lot of the things like you just said, going up to the people who ran the conferences and talking to them? I mean, that all seemed to be part of your DNA.
I look at it like this, sometimes you're around people that have a different attitude than you have. They don't want to fail. Well, how do you go through life and not failing? Well, I'll tell you what it is. You choose the safest and easiest choice, no matter what the dynamics are of the decision you're riding. Make you're going. There's no way I can fail if I go this route. I'm going to take this easy job. It's a good time off and blah blah blah. No, who wants to say no? I want to go to the edge. I want something fired at me every single day. Right. And my life, living on the edge of construction on a skyscraper building or something. I was willing to do anything that, to get me further ahead down the road. And I think, you might be able to satisfy yourself and say, I never failed, but you never accomplished anything. You lived below your skills and abilities. I love the stories about the people that failed and came back. You know what? I read a lot of books on business about failing and succeeding. Everybody that succeeded, Ray Kroc, all those guys that were in the food business, they all failed at some point in time in their career, but they learned from it, and they weren't the same person. There's a book out there, I read, Failing Forward, it's called. Every time you fail, you learn what you did wrong and not to do it again. And you would put yourself in a position, now you're ready to go. Well, that's a hard route to take if you have a situation in your hometown or even within your family, and you're going to get criticized if you fail. I told you never should have done that. Yeah. I told you those. Believe me, a lot of people from my hometown, when I came back after getting surgery and all that, the first day in Ohio State, I come back with this big cast. I mean, from my hip way down to my ankle. They go, I told you, Doug, they're going to eat you alive out there. I just digested it.
I guess the only failure in failure is not learning, right? I just came up with that, Doug. We should copyright that, right?
Yeah, it's just
the only failure in failure is not learning.
You know what though? If you read a lot, and like I said, I always believed those that don't read are no better than those that can't read. And reading there's some incredible stories and incredible stories about people failing. It's almost true of almost anybody in success that I've read in a book. They fail and then they learn how to succeed. They get better. And same thing with putting people. I love Jim Tressel at Ohio State, coaching, playing with him for coaching, being able to be an assistant coach under him for a year. Man, oh man, this guy, he had an acronym banner up on the wall of the Ohio State athletic facility. YAW, YAW. You are who you associate with. And you walked out the door. He had it hanging right above the door. You're going, man, I'm going to start associating with people that are go-getters, achievers, successful.
But how many people does that really reach? That kind of sign. Do players sort of look at that and say, "Yeah, whatever," or do they resonate with a lot of the people in that locker room?
I think that all of us, I think all of us have a switching system inside our brain here, our body. And I think that switch system is different for each person you talk to. Sometimes you might even talk to somebody and just maybe throw something out there that maybe isn't very emphatic or whatever. That's all that guy needs. He just needs to know about it. Boom. He's already made his decision. He's already processing. I'm going to be in that business. I'm going to be successful. And I know I can do the job. Other people are out daydreaming. They're not focused. They're not. I would rather try something and fail. At least I know, I tried. I gave it my best. And I believe me, I failed in a lot of things in my life. But I look back on that, and there were some times where I could have gone a little bit further had I made a few more calls, a few more opportunities. That haunts me, because you can't turn back the hands of time.
Right.
I would rather go back and say, yeah, I failed, but you know what? I ran over 5 guys to get there, and I did the best I could. I just couldn't get that giant over top of him because he was better than me, more sophisticated, more talented. At least then, you know what? You did everything you could do. Instead of, I just think back many times, opportunities and challenges that I had, I didn't take them. I looked the other way. And, I learned this early on, though, just the same thing going back, clear back to the Joe Paterno story. Um, Make sure that if you fail, at least you're going to be almost there. Don't be so out of your reach that the first day you show up, they go, no, you're terrible. You're get out of here. You have to be able to maybe say, if everything goes right, I can make this work. Right. Be in a position like that, because then all of a sudden it's positive. Then you can start figuring out where you went wrong. But if you showed up the first day and they were just kicking your ass, you're going, I made a bad decision there. I don't want to do that again. So at least, these things like you mentioned you had success with, that I had success with. I at least did my investigation and thought, you know what? Like that first day when I went to Ohio State, I said, I can play with these guys and get into Chicago. That first, I know I'm a 12th round draft pick. I know I'm the fourth depth on the depth chart. You know what, though? You guys haven't seen me yet.
Yeah, so it's interesting, Doug, because it's so interesting how that thought process resonates with me, because you can't see it on my wall over here. I got my degrees, but I got my CPA license. And I had such a mental block about taking that exam. My wife convinced me. She goes, you can pass it. She goes, you can pass it. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to go in there and I'm going to take it. Not going to study for it. And I walked out there and said, oh my gosh, I could pass this. And then I buckled down and I passed it. Now I'm a licensed CPA, and I got it like whatever it was 20 years ago, but I had a mental block, and she convinced me, just take it. And I walked out like you said, I can do this. Right. Yeah. And it's really interesting. So Doug, this has been a great discussion. Let's close it out with a round of what I call the binge burn around. I'll give you a couple of players. Just give me your quick thoughts on them, like you did with Walter Payton. How about Wally Chambers?
Very gifted gentleman, 6'6". He came off the ball faster than anybody I can imagine. He could bring that hand from being on the turf with his three fingers and slapping somebody in the side of the head. That was allowed back in that day. Right. Tremendous athlete. I would just say, he started incurring injuries because he had real long joints, long legs. I think he was 6'6" or 6'7", and so people kept trying to cut his legs down, but no, And what a jovial guy, too. He was having fun every day that he was out there playing.
45 and a half career sacks. People forget that guy. That's why that's why I love bringing up people like this in this round of questions. How about Jim Osborne, 81 career sacks?
Hard worker. Again, I took a CPA exam, too, and I failed it. But you know what? Then I didn't have enough time. I was distracted onto something else. Jim, I was always good friends with Jim because Jim was in the accounting business.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I don't know if he was a CPA or not, but he did my tax returns a couple of years. And I liked him because what a gentleman, just always very positive. And, but he was strong. He showed up every day. He was somebody you could count on. Yes, he had a good sense of humor. And, and everything was, football is a game where you got to play with injuries. So you're not only evaluated on talent, how good can you play after you get knocked out, pull a muscle, have a cramp, break a bone. I've played with all those situations. Mm-hmm. Even spinal stenosis. I played 4 games. That's what eventually ended my career when I started losing the feeling in my left leg after having spinal stenosis, which is a narrowing your spinal canal. And that was the end for Doug Plank. But Jim Osborne, smart, intelligent guy. And the other thing was, as soon as I whacked somebody and his helmet fell off or something, not Jim, but another opponent, Jim Osborne came over to me, I remember, as a rookie and said, man, I've never seen a rookie do that. And he was my friend ever since.
There you go. How about, we talked about Buddy Ryan. You touched a little bit on Mike Ditka. What about Mike Ditka?
The Bears would have never went to the Super Bowl without Mike Ditka. As much as I like Buddy Ryan, I don't know if Buddy was able to put the whole thing together. He could certainly put the defense together. But, some families, fathers really have a problem sometimes communicating and connecting with their girls in the family, the daughters. That was Buddy Ryan with regard to like offensive players. There was no way. There was no message, no resonation whatsoever. Defense, yes. slap them in the face, kick them into, where else. Got their attention. He brought a lot of those guys in that room to tears. I wasn't on the team at that time. But when Buddy announced that he was going to leave and go to Philadelphia, and then he walked out of the room. Gary Fencik told me this story. I don't know if it was Otis Wilson, whoever it was, picked up the projector and just threw it through the film, the screen. Wow. Said, "Let's get out of here." That was the night before the Super Bowl. That was right before Buddy left. When they played the Patriots, and but anyway, it was just a situation that I'm sorry, what the question was again?
Mike Ditka.
Okay, Mike. Mike came in. I really liked Mike because he was a great NFL player. With the Bears, and and he had a lot of pride in himself, and he brought a lot of the stuff from the Cowboys too, in terms of from offense and defense and stuff like that. But he realized also that he might have been in contention with Buddy Ryan for that job before he was hired. And both men knew that. Can imagine being in a workplace where you and your boss were trying for the same position and you almost got it. Right. So it's almost like you two are like, okay, it's almost a natural friction that just showed up there every single day. And I'll tell you this, during practices, it was Buddy's team against Mike's team, and Buddy won most of those. I mean, now, other than Walter, I'm sorry, nobody was going to hit Walter, but everybody else was game. And let's go. Let's bring it on.
There you go. Let's end it on someone you just mentioned. And I, as a Dolphins fan, I always wondered how this guy got away, and he's your fellow hitman, but Gary Fencik.
How about Gary going to Yale University? Yeah. No disrespect for Yale. They make great astronauts and mathematicians and professors. Football players, I mean, come on, NFL players. Right. Gary Fencik and maybe, I don't know, a couple other people. Gary, his first year, he was injured during training camp, and they let him go. And then he comes to Chicago Bears. He lives in a suburb of Chicago, in Barrington, which is like one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the city. Not in the city, but in the suburbs. And I'm driving to practice one day from where I lived in Arlington Heights, which was a suburb of Northwest Chicago, up to Lake Forest where we practiced. And I see a kid out in the middle of nowhere. What's that one movie, I'm trying to think, with Tom Hanks, where at the end of the movie, he sees a girl driving away in a car across the cornfields. Well, you went through cornfields to get to Lake Forest where we practice. Cornfield. This is me on my second year of going to, as I'm starting now. And I see a kid on the road, his car is broken down and he's stumbling. And I thought, you know what? This kid will go nowhere. There's no houses within 2 miles of the location, maybe even 5 miles. I go, I got to stop. I'm sorry. I don't care if the kid's a robber or whatever. I'm dropping him off somewhere. And we get talking and I go, where are you going? He goes, well, I'm going over to Lake Forest. And I go, well, I'm going to Lake Forest because that was our training camp. So we start talking. I go, who are you going to talk to over there? He goes, well, I'm going to be interviewed by the Chicago Bears. I went, Chicago Bears? He goes, yeah, I was with the, Miami Dolphins and went to Yale, and I'm going to try to be a safety. He was a receiver at Yale. And I said, well, that's where I'm going. It was Gary Fencik. I mean, it's crazy. So him and I talked. He said that first year, Doug, all I did was sit in the back of the row in the defensive meeting rooms because he only played on special teams, had a hoodie on, covered his face, head and up, all this kind of stuff. He said, I just watched you play. He said, I've never seen anybody play safety like you. You're just running up there like you're in some kind of a race to hit somebody. And he said, you know what? Everybody liked it. So I felt like that was a good starting point. And it's funny, when I played with Gary, he was 45, I was 46. I can't tell you how many times right on the field now, I walk by somebody and, he yelled at it might be a lineman or running back. He goes, you stink, Plank. Why are you always cheap shotting me? No, it was Gary Fencik. It was, and the same thing with Gary. They thought it was him because they called me out sometimes, a lot of times with Fencik if they didn't see the name on my back.
One thing I noticed was in some of those shorts that I posted to you, every time you laid somebody out, there was Fencik going to see if the guy was okay. It was always 46 would lay him out, and 45 would always hover over the guy to see if he was okay. That's what I noticed. I was like, man, those two are good teammates, aren't they?
You know what I like about Gary, though? He didn't make mistakes. He didn't have mental errors. Mental errors will beat you faster than anything. It's not that the guys in the NFL aren't strong, quick, that they got great reactions. They can do strong. They make mistakes. They go the wrong way. They forget their assignment. And that didn't happen with Gary. I knew exactly where he was going to be on the inside, the outside. He was going to be in back of me, in front of me. Believe me, when you're coming up there and you're taking on a blocker and the running back's right behind it, I'm going to do everything I can to steer that guy to Gary. And he always performed.
So let's just wrap it up on this question then. Let's ask one more question because you sort of brought it up. Was there a lot of chatter, trash talk from you to the other team to you guys all throughout all these games?
You know what? I felt like there was nothing that I could say to someone that was going to make it better. When you hit somebody as hard as you can, and maybe they get up or they don't get up. I was never that person to sit over top of somebody and say, "See, I told you I was going to hit you, and you deserve it." I never said a word. Even those that came up to me and got right in my face, spitting in my face about how pathetic I was. You know what? It's incredible to me, even after years and years of not seeing a person on another team, once they realize who I was, at a banquet or something like that, they would come up to me and go, "You're just an MFer," and you're just, they would think of their worst 10 profanity words and put them all together and say, you. And, one thing I never really felt good about something in football that happened was hitting a guy hard and incurring an injury, him incurring an injury that was it for him. He never came back. And that happened to me 3 times where I hit players, they didn't come back and play. Their career was over. And my intention was to never, ever, because we're all in the same band. We're in a brotherhood, to look out for each other. And yes, I'll hit you hard, but I'm not going to hit you hard in the back. I'm not going to, cheap shot you. You're going to know I'm coming. You're going to see me coming. And yeah, I know, and I feel for your injury. And
yeah. Well, that's the theme you hear a lot from these guys, whether it's football, baseball, whatever, is they'll play hard, they play within the rules, and they never want to hurt anybody because that is your career, right?
Right,
so,
it is.
Good point.
And it's somebody else's. It's somebody,
Exactly.
I've been around grown men. I listen, I never cried. Growing up in Pennsylvania, listen, I had 100 stitches by the time I was 9 years old. Getting rocks hit off the head, boom, boom, boom. It was kind of a blue collar type behavior. But I remember being in football one time and somebody did something for me, took out a blocker or something like that. I'm just standing there. This is on the field now. I'm just crying. And somebody says, why are you crying? I go, I'm crying for what you did for me. It's just like, I know football's not life and death. At times it seems like it though. When you're playing against teams like the Raiders and things like that, guys that were really out to get you. That's why whenever we played them, man, oh man, I put my game face on from the very moment we stepped onto that field. This is for real. This is life and death, and I'm going to play accordingly. And I know I'm playing the Raiders, but I'm a Chicago Bear, and we got every bit of recognition and fear as you do. And but no, yeah, that was Gary. Gary was just such a nice piece of a part of our defense, so that I could count on him, trust him. And you know what? And here's the other thing too. You look at football. I look at this in the rearview mirror now. It is so much fun and so much more recognizable if you have someone that feels the same way you do in terms of how you like to play the game, because watching one player do that is not as good as watching two players do it. And it was fun. Like I said, I like when people call me Fencik, and call him Plank. It's like we were interchangeable. And that was some of the funnest days of my life.
That's great. Well, Doug, thank you so much for taking part on my podcast. I've enjoyed our conversation. Appreciate you stopping by. Thank you.
No, listen, I enjoyed it more than you did. And thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.